My department head laughed loudly in front of our entire team and shouted, "Why would we listen to someone who can't even lead a conference call without crying?" The room fell uncomfortably silent as he added, "Maybe stick to silent tasks like filing." I nodded, stayed silent, and quietly attached his recorded HR violations to a complaint that went straight to the VP. He was gone before the end of the quarter, no goodbye party. I never thought I'd tell this story, but here I am. I've been working at a logistics company in Cincinnati for 7 years. Same desk, same gray carpet, same coffee machine that hasn't been cleaned since 2016. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills and I'm good at what I do. Systems analyst. I fix problems, track delays, and make sure our regional warehouse software doesn't explode when someone tries to reroute a shipment. I've always kept my head down. I'm not loud, not flashy, definitely not corporate star material. I'm 38, single, no kids, and I prefer it that way. I just want to do my job, get paid, and go home to my dog in my quiet apartment. Then Rick showed up. He was brought in to modernize the department. That was the phrase the VP used. Rick came from some high-tech firm in Seattle, and from day one he acted like we were all stuck in the Stone Age. He made fun of our software, our workflows, even the way we formatted our reports. Rick was the kind of guy who used words like synergize and thought leader unironically. He wore loafers with no socks and liked to talk about how much he lifted at 5 a.m. He also had no clue how to treat people, especially people who weren't like him. He liked to play favorites. The loud guys who played fantasy football with him could do no wrong. The rest of us? Background noise. But he saved the worst for me. Maybe it was because I didn't laugh at his dumb jokes. Maybe it was because I corrected him once during a meeting when he got a tech spec wrong. Or maybe it was just because I'm quiet and he thought I wouldn't push back. It started with little digs. "Thanks for your input, but let's hear from someone with field experience." Or, "I'm sure the analysts agree, even if they don't say much." But the worst day came in early fall, during our quarterly vendor call. We had this huge account we were trying to retain. I'd been working overtime for weeks cleaning up a mess caused by one of Rick's pet projects. He had rolled out a patch without testing it properly, and it messed up all the route syncing with our vendor system. That morning, I barely slept. I was nervous, but I was prepared. My slides were clear. My data was solid. I logged into the video call 10 minutes early just to be sure everything worked. The vendor's tech lead came in hot. Accused us of delaying their orders, messing with their margins. I tried to explain the patch error, but he kept interrupting me. I was already on edge. My voice cracked. Then I felt it, my throat closing, my eyes burning. I muted myself and stared at the screen. Took deep breaths. No one said anything. I was only muted for 20 seconds, but it felt like an hour. Then I turned my mic back on and finished the damn call. I thought that was the end of it. I figured people would forget, or at least pretend to. I was wrong. The next day, we had our morning stand-up. Everyone was there, 10 people in a cramped conference room, 2 on Zoom. I gave my update, mentioned that the vendor issue was mostly resolved. Rick leaned back in his chair, sipped his coffee, then looked right at me and said, "Why would we listen to someone who can't even lead a conference call without crying?" He said it loud, almost like he wanted everyone to hear. Nobody laughed. But nobody said anything either. Then he added, "Maybe stick to silent tasks like filing." He smirked. I felt the room shift. People looked at the floor, at their notepads, anywhere but at me. I didn't say a word. I nodded and sat down. I could feel my ears burning. I held it together until the meeting ended. Then I went to the bathroom and locked myself in the last stall. I sat there and stared at the wall, thinking, he wants me to quit. He's trying to humiliate me out of this job. But I didn't quit. That night I sat at my kitchen table and opened the folder I'd been building for months. See, I'd been keeping track of Rick since about 3 months into his tenure. Not because I planned this, but because something felt off. He was careless with his words. I started saving Slack messages, email chains, voice memos from meetings. Nothing doctored, just raw records. There was the time he joked in a meeting that women have a natural advantage in negotiations because people pity them. There was the time he denied a junior team member's time-off request and told him, "Real engineers don't need mental health days." There were screenshots. There were recordings. There were timestamps. I organized it all, put it into folders with labels. I cross-referenced dates with calendar invites and HR policies. Then I wrote a report. I stayed up all night writing it. I didn't try to sound angry. I just laid out the facts. Then I logged into our HR portal, filed the complaint, attached everything, and checked the box that said send to senior leadership. I sent it directly to the VP of operations, the same guy who brought Rick in. Then I closed my laptop and waited. Nothing happened the next day. Or the day after that. Rick was still doing his strut around the office. Still handing out assignments like a king on a throne. But something shifted in his face. He looked more tired, more cautious. A week later, HR scheduled back-to-back check-ins with every team member. Anonymous surveys came out. Some of my coworkers whispered about being asked if they ever felt targeted or uncomfortable in meetings. Then Rick started disappearing for hours in the middle of the day. Then for whole days. 3 weeks later, we got an email. All hands meeting Friday at 10 a.m. Org updates and Q4 wrap-up. I knew. That Friday we logged in. The VP talked for 5 minutes about performance goals. Then he said, Rick has decided to step down, effective immediately. No slide. No thanks. No revier. Just gone. He never came back to pack up his desk. HR did it for him. His name was wiped from the org chart by Monday. Nobody asked questions. Nobody missed him. I didn't smile. Not in front of anyone. But I finally slept that night. This isn't the end of the story. Not yet. But it was the start of something. Because people noticed. Not just Rick leaving, but me. The quiet one. They started asking me to lead again. And I said yes. After Rick left, things were quiet for about a week. People walked lighter. Meetings weren't so tense. For the first time in a long time, I didn't dread logging in every morning. It felt like the sun finally came through after 2 years of gray. But peace doesn't last in corporate. The VP made Sharon our interim department head. She was fair, direct, and she actually knew the systems we used. I'd worked with her before on a vendor rollout. She was one of the few people Rick couldn't push around. At first it felt like things were getting better. Sharon cleaned up old processes, brought back peer review on code pushes, and cut the useless team building Zooms that Rick loved. She even asked me to help draft a new onboarding process for junior hires. I thought that was it. I thought I was finally free. Then I started getting those looks. From Rick's old buddies Tom, Jason, and Pete. They were the ones who used to laugh at Rick's jokes. They never said anything outright, but they stopped saying hello. They started going to lunch without inviting anyone else. If I walked into a room, they'd go quiet. Then the rumors started. Someone told Sharon that I'd forced Rick out with lies. That I was angling for his job. That I faked a breakdown for sympathy. I only found out because Sharon called me into her office one afternoon. She shut the door and said, I need you to know something. Someone's trying to make it look like you had a personal grudge against Rick. That you exaggerated your complaint. I didn't say anything for a few seconds. I just stared at the floor and felt my chest tighten. She leaned forward. I don't believe it. But they're planting seeds. You need to be ready. After that, it got worse. Jason started sending Sharon on every email he sent me. Even basic ones like, updated the spreadsheet. Pete pushed back on every suggestion I made in team meetings, even when it was clearly the best option. Tom whispered during calls when I was presenting, just loud enough to be heard, but not clear enough to be called out. I could feel them circling. Then one night I stayed late finishing documentation. I went to the break room for water and I saw it. Jason and Pete standing in the hallway whispering. They didn't see me. Pete said clear as day. She thinks she's safe now, but if you dig deep enough, everyone's got dirt. I didn't sleep that night. I started second-guessing everything. Was this what Rick meant when he used to say play the long game? Had he trained them to clean up after him if things went south? But I wasn't the same person I was 6 months ago. I went back into that folder. The one where I kept Rick's stuff. And I looked closer. Rick never worked alone. I found Slack threads where Jason helped him push through the bad patch that caused our vendor issue, and then tried to blame it on me. I found emails Pete forwarded that were supposed to go only to HR. I found a Google Doc edit history where Tom had replaced my name with Rick's before submitting a team project. These weren't just his sidekicks. They were covering for him. They'd been doing it all along. And I still had admin access to our internal audit logs. So I started pulling access histories, login times, shared drive edits, change histories. Then I found it. A file labeled vendor feedback _2023. Rick had edited it a week before our call. And he deleted 2 sections that would have proved the vendor's system was to blame. That was the day I froze on the call. He had set me up. And Jason had been the last one to access the file after Rick. I saved it, printed it, added it to a second report. This time, I didn't send it to HR. I set up a meeting with Sharon. I told her everything. The harassment, the rumors, the sabotage. I showed her the file logs, the deleted lines, the Slack messages, everything. She didn't say much, just nodded and took notes. A few days later, all 3 of them, Tom, Jason, and Pete, were removed from our project queue. By the end of the week, they were on reassignment. But I knew this wasn't over. Because that same week I found out something else. Rick had started a consulting firm. And guess who his first client was? Our vendor. The one from the call. The one who yelled at me. The one who blamed us for the delay. Turns out, Rick had been talking to them while he was still working for us. And I had proof. I stared at the LinkedIn update for a long time. Rick was now calling himself a supply chain optimization consultant. And his first listed client was the very same vendor that had torn into me on that call. The one I had nearly cried through. The one Rick mocked me for afterward. That wasn't a coincidence. I dug deeper. Their website had just gone live. It looked rushed, half-finished, but his name was right there on the About page. So was a testimonial from the vendor CEO praising Rick's strategic insight and timely support during a critical transition period. My stomach turned. Rick had been helping them while he was still employed by us. He tanked the rollout. He let me take the heat. Then he walked into that vendor relationship with a new business card ready to go. It wasn't just unethical. It was a breach of his non-compete agreement. The next morning, I brought everything to Sharon. Emails, timeline, screenshots of the testimonial, a copy of our company's policy handbook, with the non-compete clause highlighted in yellow. She went pale. "This isn't just internal," she said. "This could become legal." I nodded. I knew what I was doing. And I wasn't done. Because as I was going through those vendor call records, I found something else. An audio file buried deep in our shared drive archive, dated a week before the vendor call. Rick had set up a prep meeting with Jason, Tom, and one of the vendor's tech leads. I wasn't invited. The call was supposed to be about syncing systems. But what I heard made my jaw drop. Rick was coaching the vendor rep, telling him to lean hard on the system delays, and to make it look like the analyst team wasn't ready. His exact words: "If she breaks under pressure, even better. I'll handle the fallout." He knew exactly what he was doing. He had planned it. That crack in my voice. That moment of panic? He had built that moment. He wanted me to break. I didn't. But now I had his voice, saying everything. No one could deny what he'd done. I brought the recording to Sharon. She didn't say a word. Just sat there, staring at her monitor, hand covering her mouth. When it ended, she looked at me and said, "This goes above me." Legal got involved the next day. They launched a full investigation. Internal security pulled the audit logs from our drive servers. IT scanned for backdoor access points. Turns out, Rick had used Jason's login to pull files even after he was gone. The vendor rep involved? He got fired within the week. But Rick? Rick went quiet. His website disappeared. His LinkedIn changed. No mention of the vendor. His job title just said, Consultant. Stealth mode. But I wasn't going to let him slink away. Because right around then I got a message. From someone I didn't expect. Rick's old manager. From his last job in Seattle. She'd seen my LinkedIn post about being grateful for real leadership. And reached out privately. She told me Rick had left his last company under unusual circumstances. She didn't say much at first, but I could read between the lines. I told her what had happened here. She paused, then said, "He did it again?" We traded details. Timeline, vendor names, behavior patterns. It matched. She gave me her lawyer's contact info. He was already looking into Rick for breaching a settlement agreement related to employee misconduct. And that's when I knew. Rick wasn't just toxic. He was a pattern. He'd done this before. He'd sabotaged, bullied, manipulated. And he always found a way to slip out, just before the walls closed in. But this time he left too many cracks behind. After Rick's old boss and I spoke, I realized I wasn't the only one he'd done this to. She didn't say everything, but it was clear he left his last company with a quiet settlement. There had been complaints, HR issues, manipulation. He was a repeat offender and somehow he kept failing upward. Not this time. Her lawyer took my documents. The emails, the audio, the vendor timeline, all of it. I signed a statement. A few days later, I was contacted by our company's legal team. They were moving forward. And now that they had proof Rick was actively working with the vendor while employed with us, it was more than just a violation. It was fraud, conflict of interest, corporate sabotage, breach of contract. And thanks to the call recording, they could prove intent. He tried to set me up, but I had his voice doing the damage. About 3 weeks after that, we got the internal memo. Rick was under full investigation. Our company had filed a lawsuit. So had the vendors board. Turns out, Rick had convinced their tech lead to hide errors from their own leadership team. That guy had already been fired, and now Rick was being hit from both sides. I never saw it in person, but I heard from someone in legal that Rick tried to settle. Quietly. But Sharon, backed by the VP, refused. They wanted it public. They wanted a warning. They released a statement to the industry press, citing deliberate misconduct by a former department head that led to major contractual breaches. They didn't name him, but everyone in our space knew who it was. The fallout was instant. The vendor cut ties with every contact Rick ever gave them. His consulting website never came back online. Recruiters who had been trying to connect him with opportunities dropped him cold. Then it got worse for him. The state licensing board that oversaw tech contractors and supply consultants opened their own file. They flagged his credentials for review. And remember that lawyer from Seattle? He filed for breach of Rick's previous settlement too. That meant 2 lawsuits. I didn't hear much after that. But I did hear this. Rick sold his house. Someone saw the listing online. It was priced to move and fast. The final twist? A friend of mine from the HR department, someone who quietly supported me through this, forwarded a copy of an anonymous exit survey. Jason had filled it out the day he left. He blamed Rick for everything. Said Rick pressured him into accessing documents, that he followed orders, and that he should have said no. He begged for his file to show he had confessed. He never apologized to me. Neither did Pete or Tom. But they're gone now. Every one of them. Sharon stayed on as department head. The VP made her permanent 2 months after Rick was publicly named in the legal filings. Under her, the team's actually growing. She restructured the promotion track, gave more visibility to analysts, and even asked me to co-lead a new training program for incoming staff. I almost said no. I was tired. Worn down. Part of me wanted to disappear, not step into the light. But then I remembered what Rick said. If she breaks under pressure, even better. I didn't break. I got stronger. I accepted the role. I trained the new hires. I told them what I wish someone had told me. If something feels wrong, document everything. Protect yourself. Don't let anyone shame you for speaking up. As for me, I've learned something I didn't expect. Getting revenge didn't feel like a movie moment. It felt quiet. Still. Like closing a door you thought you'd have to live behind forever. But when I closed it, I locked it behind me. I left Rick on the other side. He made me cry in front of people I respected. He mocked me. Tried to erase me. But now, his name is a cautionary tale in the industry. Mine? I'm the one who stayed. I'm the one who spoke up. And I'm still here. Leading.